It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC, live from the Green Space today, our ground floor theater here at WNYC, with a room full of listeners who have braved the rain to come and see us do the show. For people on the right schedule, you know, this is a great thing. There aren't a lot of 10 a.m. tickets in New York. So welcome you early birds. Glad you're here. Give yourselves a round of applause for setting your alarms. Now, later in the show, we'll have the pleasure of talking to Radiolab co-host Robert Krulwich on the occasion of his retirement. We'll play clips from his old days in network television as well as in public radio and talk about media and science and life. Robert Krulwich coming up. We'll also talk today about the right age for giving your kid a cell phone, and are different kinds of phones differently age appropriate. Maybe you saw the article in the New York Times the other day that's being widely shared in parenting circles. The writer of that article is going to be here. And City Council member Brad Lander from Brooklyn will be here to talk about his new bill. The council just passed, and I think the mayor's going to sign it after some hesitation, to get some of the worst drivers off the road. And as a longtime city activist and politician, we'll get his take on Michael Bloomberg for president and Team Bloomberg's idea of Andrew Yang for mayor. Have you heard that one yet? We begin today with a couple of clips from the presidential hopeful who came in fourth in New Hampshire. You will recognize the voice.
That Senator Sanders and Mayor Buttigieg had strong nights. And I also want to congratulate my friend and colleague, Amy Klobuchar, for showing just how wrong the pundits can be when they count a woman out.
Elizabeth Warren, of course, showing some solidarity with Amy Klobuchar, one of the candidates on the rise right now in this very changeable year. Senator Warren also had a warning for her party that ends with what might be an emerging theme in her own campaign.
Senator Sanders and Mayor Buttigieg are both great people, and either one of them would be a far better president than Donald Trump. I respect them both. But the fight between factions in our party has taken a sharp turn in recent weeks, with ads mocking other candidates and with supporters of some candidates shouting curses at other Democratic candidates. These harsh tactics might work if you are willing to burn down the rest of the party in order to be the last man standing. They might work if you don't worry about leaving our party and our politics worse off than how you found it. And they might work if you think only you have all the answers and only you are the solution to all our problems. But if we're going to beat Donald Trump in November, we are going to need huge turnout within our party. And to get that turnout, we will need a nominee that the broadest coalition of our party feels like they can get behind.
Elizabeth Warren, after the New Hampshire primary results came in, with her only getting 8% of the vote on Tuesday night. By the way, before I forget, listeners, when we're in the Green Space, you can also watch the show if you would like to, because the Green Space has a live video stream. So you can go right to our homepage at WNYC.org if you'd like to watch us do the show today. WNYC.org has the live video stream from the Green Space. With me now here in the Green Space is Joan Walsh, National Affairs Correspondent for The Nation, CNN political contributor, and author of the book, What's the Matter with White People? Finding Our Way in the Next America. Please welcome Joan Walsh to the Green Space.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
So, Joan, hi. Good to see you again.
Likewise.
We've been having this conversation for a long time, one way or another, and you've been covering the Warren campaign, and you've been pretty supportive, I think it's fair to say. In New Hampshire, Warren came in fourth at 8%. Amy Klobuchar came in third at 20%. It's just one state, but it's the one that just went. So why do you think Klobuchar rose and Warren fell?
I think there's two reasons, honestly. Amy Klobuchar had a fantastic debate. She knows how to debate. She made the most of her time, and she grabbed more time. Warren tends to be, maybe because she's a professor, she doesn't like people disrupting and, raising their hands and talking out of turn, so she didn't do that. I also think there's a little bit of a media bias towards Amy Klobuchar. First of all, towards a new story emerging. Like, we love news stories. And so Warren was the story of the summer, her rise. Now there's Amy. The media tends to be more moderate. And so I think there's a desire in the mainstream for a perceived mainstream moderate candidate given the collapse of Joe Biden. And so, Buttigieg did that in Iowa, although that was really too close to call, essentially too close to call. And Amy Klobuchar did it in New Hampshire. Not to take anything away from Bernie Sanders in either place, but when we're talking about the folks who really are supportive of a strong moderate emerging, they really like the Amy storyline right now.
In the second clip we played, Warren warned about candidates and their supporters tearing each other down and acting like they have the only solutions to things. Did you take that as Warren becoming more critical of Bernie Sanders in particular, or Sanders and Buttigieg kind of equally, because he also uses that line, Buttigieg does, or something more general than that?
No, I think it was looking at Bernie's supporters. I mean, she even used the word burning it all down. Maybe that was an accident, but I heard that.
I missed that.
No, I mean...
Good ears.
I think it's fair to say that, supporters of every candidate can have some sharp elbows, and there are jerks on every side. But, there was a dinner in New Hampshire the other night where Sanders supporters booed several of the candidates, but really gave it to Pete Buttigieg. He's not my candidate, but the level of frank disrespect and even occasionally a little homophobia that seeps through, I think is disturbing. And I think that's what she was talking about, quite honestly.
We'll get to the homophobia. The chant that got a lot of press was Wall Street Pete, Wall
Right.
Street Pete. Does that bother you? He is taking these donations from, big money people.
I think it's a totally fair critique, and it's part of why, I'm on record. I will support the nominee. He's never been in my top choices. I think we should talk about his backers. We should talk about his policies. We should talk about the way he's backed away from certain progressive policies once he saw that moderate lane open. We should talk about his inexperience. But I think chanting that way, I have a certain amount of affection for the way, for a certain level of Democratic Party politics where people are decent to one another and we're all in this together. And so you go to these events, and I've been on the trail and not this year, but over the years in these first 4 states. And it's normally very collegial. And, I spent a lot of time in Iowa, and people clap for each other at the big, annual Iowa Liberty and Justice dinner. Used to be the Jefferson Jackson dinner, but we don't do that anymore. So chanting and mocking in public, it's not a great look.
And you did tweet last night, not a big Mayor Pete fan, you've probably noticed, but the more homophobia I see from the left, the more I imagine I might have to support him. So where are you seeing more homophobia on the left?
Oh, there was actually a meme that went around last night, a screenshot of something completely pornographic that I can't discuss with you. But if you want to find it on Twitter, it's pretty easy. People spreading rumors that, this is weird homophobia, but that he's not really gay, that it's just kind of cool to be gay. People
That's
motting.
Like three-dimensional.
I can't. I know. I'm not
homophobia.
smart enough for that one, really. But that's out there. There's just an uptick. People. I'm not sure I agreed with this, but Michael Moore made some interesting hand gestures in talking about Pete that a lot of people thought were offensive, and I was kind of maybe. I'll try to give him the benefit of the doubt on that one.
It would surprise me.
Yeah. So. It's not a dominant part of the Pete critique from the left, but it is there, and it shouldn't be there.
Do you think there's kind of a hierarchy of prejudices with Mayor Pete rising, that a sort of clean-cut, by traditional standards, white, young, male, but gay guy is sort of getting less prejudice than any woman in the race or any of the candidates of color did?
Yes, I think that is true, and I applaud our open-mindedness when it comes to, having a qualified, somewhat qualified young gay male candidate. But clearly, I mean, and Amy Klobuchar has been great on this, frankly. There's not a woman in America who could run for president with Mayor Pete's resume. And, people, it's so offensive when people compare him to Obama, because President Obama was a state senator for several years, not a long time, was then elected to the Senate. Yes, he jumped out in his first term as senator, but he had accomplished a lot more. He was a community organizer. He had lived a very interesting life of social justice. He didn't go to work for McKinsey out of college. He went to work on Chicago's South Side. I do have problems with his level of qualification, and no woman would be getting a second look.
And since electability is so high on people's lists of why they're voting for one Democrat or another this year, I've been surprised. I've talked about on the show before, surprised by the number of women who will call in who desperately want to defeat Trump, but worry out loud that a woman will lose too many votes just for being a woman, like they say Hillary Clinton did, and so would be more inclined to support a man. I had one the other day, a woman who definitely wants a Democrat to win, who worries that once we get to a general election, there'll be too much homophobia for Buttigieg to get elected. I'm waiting for, with Bernie and Bloomberg, and I haven't heard it yet, but when are people going to start saying, can a Jew really get elected in America in 2020? I don't know.
Right. Two New York Jews running against each other could be a very, very interesting thing to see when the circus gets to New York. It could come down to that. No, I mean, there are lots of isms, but we did elect Barack Obama. We're suffering a terrible backlash for that, but we did elect him. And I say to those women, woman up. It's time to woman up. And if you like her, vote for her. This idea of electability, there's no electability formula. And especially at this point in the primary process, and even earlier when we had so many great candidates and candidates of color, I just tell people, vote with your heart. No one knows. People tried to sell us Joe Biden as the electable guy. I don't think Joe Biden's going to make it past South Carolina, with all due respect and affection and some sadness for him. But nobody knows who's electable right now. So everybody, we live in this age of social media where everybody feels like they are a pundit. I mean, punditry is terrible. And so why you would want to be a pundit when you have a better job and a real life, I don't understand. But everybody thinks that it's their job to figure out just how to thread the needle and who's going to be electable, and we don't know. So vote for the person you love or like enough, and then let's see.
And to that point, we mentioned this on the show yesterday too, but the Quinnipiac poll that came out the other day that showed a kind of shuffling of support for the Democratic candidates in various ways showed, as I think previous ones have done too, that Bernie Sanders, who's the person who seems to draw the most Democratic establishment concern about electability, beats Trump in the hypothetical head-to-head matchup right at the top level, along with Bloomberg, by 8 or 9 points.
Right. I am not somebody who says Bernie is not electable at this point. I don't know, we know this is a cliche, but I'm a pundit, so that's my thing. He has a high floor, but he might have a low ceiling. We're seeing that he's getting around a quarter of the vote in these first 2 states. Only 2 states, shouldn't pay too much attention. It's possible that he doesn't have that much room to grow, or he might surprise us and really take off. He's certainly doing the best right now, and again, I don't think anybody should write him off for that reason. If you don't like his politics, if you're concerned about Medicare for all, whatever, there are reasons not to vote for him, but just simply assuming he can't be elected is not a good one, in my opinion.
Joan Walsh, national correspondent for The Nation, is with us here in the Green Space. today on WNYC. And listeners, we can take calls. How about from Warren supporters to start out, or anyone else? If you're a Warren supporter, why do you think she only did as well as she did in these first two states? Maybe if you were for Warren earlier but have drifted towards someone else, what caused you to stray? Or anyone else with a question for Joan Walsh from The Nation, 212-433-WNYC, 212-433-9692. Or audience here in the green space, raise your hand and we'll come around with a microphone. To go back to that Warren clip that we played, she finished that thought seeming to position herself as not in any wing of the party, even though her early reputation has been from the progressive wing along with Sanders. Do you see Warren repositioning herself as more of a unity candidate than before?
Absolutely. Partly because we're getting to the end, well, the beginning of the end, but there's been a year-long primary. And so when I saw her in Iowa, I wrote about this at the time. I was struck by the fact that she was calling out, it's so sad that Kamala had to drop out and Corey had to drop out because of money, just as billionaires were getting into the race. I called Kamala and asked about her, reproductive rights plan. I called Kirsten Gillibrand and asked if I could use her family leave plan. She's definitely now trying, I don't know if it's working, but trying to position herself as the person who's bringing in the disappointed supporters of the folks who've dropped out along the way. And I think she's also realizing if she has a lane, I hate to talk about lanes, but if she has if she can get out of this early ditch that she's in, and it is still early, it just might be getting a little bit, not away from the left, keeping her positions intact. But I think she made a fundamental mistake at the beginning, and I thought she was right. So I made a mistake of trying to position herself as close to Bernie, believing that all the Bernie supporters who in 2016 said, I want to vote for a woman, just not that woman, the corporate shill, whatever, I would have voted for Elizabeth Warren, for example. I literally could name people who said that, who now are, hounding her with snake emojis and calling her the worst names in the world. So, Bernie, to his credit, in 2016, saw this run Elizabeth run semi-movement, waited to see if she would run, talked to her. She said, no, I'm not running. And then he ran. But I think she looked at that and said, well, wow, that movement really started for me. And I have, a lot of the same positions as Bernie and a lot of experience. I'm going to go after those voters. And I think she also hoped for a while that Bernie would not run, but he did. So, I think really thinking she could pull significant support away from Bernie in the beginning was probably a mistake.
And I've seen commentary in several media outlets that says the voters Warren lost compared to last summer or November when she was leading the New Hampshire polls did not go to Sanders. The other anti-big money, progressive, as people might assume, The Week magazine, I pulled a clip here to read, they had an article called 4 Theories for Why Warren Supporters Didn't Break for Sanders in New Hampshire. And the main 3 were policy differences, electability assessments, and that they always had different base demographics to begin with. Yeah. So I'm just curious how much, if any of that, do you think is right?
I think it is right. I mean, that's what the numbers are telling us, and the numbers told us that to some extent in Iowa as well. People who supported Warren softly and then moved away or were at least considering her actually tended to be people who wanted an alternative to Sanders. And so it is kind of counterintuitive if we put them both in that progressive, left-leaning Medicare for All lane, but for other voters aren't doing it that way. And so some voters want a woman, as I do and did. I started out thinking there were, 4 great female senators. When they had reservations, they went to Klobuchar. Some wanted someone new, which Warren is. She's not young, but she's youthful, and she's younger than some of these other guys. They went with someone really young, Mayor Pete. So yeah, I think she miscalculated on where her support would be. The suburban women. I mean, she also, somewhat belatedly has pitched herself as a feminist candidate. She didn't do that as much, but again, with hindsight, it's easy to say, but that 2018 wave that took back the Congress was largely powered by suburban women, and so I think she is recalibrating, not in terms of her stands, but in terms of her pitch, and I think it's the right thing to do if it's not too late.
Let's take a phone call on line 6. Judith in Westchester, you're on WNYC. Hi, Judith.
Hi. I just wanted to comment on what you were speaking about earlier regarding disparaging remarks or about Mayor Pete. Rather than attributing divisive and destructive remarks to a fractured Democratic Party, have you considered the possibility of Russian disinformation involvement? Remember the old saying, fool me once, shame on you, yada, yada. So I think that is a very real concern in my mind, and I hope it's a real concern in the Democratic Party and Democratic voters' minds.
And this is a thought that people would never have had before 2016.
That's
but that
right.
Russia is out there planting the idea that some Democrats are being homophobic against the others.
Right. And there was a study in the summer that showed that there was a lot of Russian bot activity, and its top target was Senator Kamala Harris, and they were spreading memes from the left that originated on the left about her criminal justice past. There is not a lot of evidence so far, although it could be true, that is what's targeting Mayor Pete. Unfortunately, I happen to know personally some of the folks who are peddling this, but some of it can be then amplified by Russian bots for sure. I think we have to, if you're on social media, really drill down on someone's account. When you start to see, somebody with no profile picture and 8 digits after their name, and they just signed up a month ago and they have 0 followers, report that person and let Twitter deal with them. I haven't seen that so much with the Mayor Pete stuff, but I have seen it.
Let's go to another caller, line 9, Scott in the Bronx. Scott, you're on with Joan Walsh from The Nation. Hi, Scott.
Hi there, guys. I was a Warren supporter until about, I guess, 2 or 3 months ago. I was kind of disappointed when she tried to distance herself, I think, from Bernie by kind of backtracking somewhat on Medicare for All and expanding the time period that she said that she would be able to, or that she would fight to install it. And then between that, and I actually hadn't found out until recently that she used to be a Republican, I think until around her mid-40s. And I can't really understand how someone could have been, someone who progressives might vote for was a Republican living through Nixon and the Bushes and Reagan and Kissinger. You kind of have to be a very heartless person to remain a Republican through all these demons like that.
Scott, can I ask before Joan?
I think I'd rather somebody who had it right from the beginning. And wasn't fooled until maybe the late 80s or so.
So that would be Bernie for you, I'm guessing, right?
I think so at this point.
Thank you. Joan?
I think there are a lot of people like Scott who, particularly on the Medicare for All change, I wouldn't say she backed away from Bernie or that she backed away from Medicare for All. I would say that she was realistic about how what it's going to take to phase it in. And I think, we're starting to see Sanders people on Twitter saying, he's not going to have 60 votes. So if he's president, he's going to have to phase it in as well. And so, one of the things that I personally like about what Warren did in her plan is that she's really focused on the fastest way to get the most people help that she can either do with executive orders or with 51 votes, hoping that we have 51 Democratic votes in the Senate to restore all the protections of Obamacare and expand on them. I think she's just being realistic, and I think she, God bless Bernie, but no one really, she was dogged to come up with a plan and how she was going to pay for it for 2 months. No one dogs Bernie about it. Bernie literally said to a reporter, the numbers, guy, I don't know, the number's going to be so high, it'll freak everybody out, so I'm not giving numbers. No woman would be allowed to get away with that. I mean, people who have studied women in politics, you have to prove that you're credentialed. And so often that means just getting down in the weeds of policies. And Elizabeth Warren, who set up the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, probably helped more Americans in need than, practically speaking, than Bernie has. God bless him. So the idea, she knows how to get things done, and she's very pragmatic while being progressive. So that's what she has in her corner. But I have heard so many people like Scott talk about that juncture being when they began not to trust her.
By the way, here's an indication of how suspicious people get about each other when we're in campaigns. A listener just tweeted, "I don't believe Scott," in quotes, "who claimed to be for Warren, then Bernie." In other words, this was always a Bernie supporter, and he just claimed to have previously been for Elizabeth Warren. We get this so much. This is a little behind the scenes. I'm sure you get it too.
Definitely.
But you can't say anything, any little piece of analysis in 2008. You're so biased for Obama. You're so biased for Clinton. Like every other line.
Right.
And it went, through other election cycles. And it is, you should have seen our Twitter the other day when back to back to back to back. You hate Pete. You hate Elizabeth. You hate Amy. You hate Bernie.
Yeah. Yeah, I get that too, even that I'm propping up Bernie, or that, I said something sympathetic about Pete, so I've always been secretly for Pete. So, yeah, I just say, please read my work. But
and there was listener-to-listener suspicion on that one.
Yeah.
We have a question here in the Green Space audience. Hi.
Hi, thank you. This is really a treat. You were talking about electability. I think also I'd love to hear you discuss who would inspire people in the states to give the Democratic president the Democratic Congress we need, because we don't want a situation of like Obama had with just say no Republicans blocking anything he tried to do.
I don't know. I mean, sort of what you're asking is who would have what we have described in the past as coattails or dress tails. I don't know. Who's gonna inspire the most turnout? The way Obama did in 2008, certainly. And I don't have a crystal ball. There are a lot of people who will tell you, Bernie won't do that. Bernie will lose seats. The Democrats won in purple areas in 2018. I don't know. I don't see the evidence. I think that people are capable. We every day brings so much new Trump scandal and things that we could not have imagined a month ago. What's now happening with the Justice Department and the Roger Stone sentencing, and now 4 career deputy U.S. attorneys quitting that case, essentially in protest of Bill Barr's Trump's interference. Okay, so by the time we get to November, we just may be in a situation where anybody could win. I could decide to write myself in, and I could win. You could win, because people are so fed up. I think you also, if you're worried, what I keep telling people, if you're concerned about the choices that you have, if you're a Democrat at the presidential level, then put your money behind congressional candidates or senators. Go put your money into state legislative races. Focus down ballot, and then we can make down ballot happen regardless of who the president is or who our nominee is. I think the Senate is hugely important. The presidency is important because of judicial appointments and lots of executive orders that she can reverse and implement. But the Senate is almost equally important because they can block those or confirm those judges. So, it's sort of on us what happens at the level of the Senate. I'm not saying you're doing this, but we have this idea that if we nominate the right person, they will ignite a movement and they will carry, Congress along with them. I'm not sure that's going to happen, and I'm not sure that that should happen. People in the state should have movements behind them. So,
you mentioned what's going on at the Justice Department.
Yeah.
Let's pivot for a second. Listeners, remember this moment from Colonel Vindman's testimony in the Trump-Ukraine hearings when he addressed his Soviet emigre father?
Dad, I'm sitting here today in the U.S. Capitol talking to our elected professionals is proof that you made the right decision 40 years ago to leave the Soviet Union and come here to the United States of America in search of a better life for our family. Do not worry. I will be fine for telling the truth.
Well, here's President Trump on Tuesday, after undercover of New Hampshire primary coverage, transferring Vindman out of his White House National Security Council job.
We sent him on his way to a much different location, and the military can handle him any way they want. General Milley has him now. I congratulate General Milley. He can have him.
And asked whether he wanted to see Vindman face discipline, Trump said that's going to be up to the military. We'll have to see. They are certainly, I imagine, going to take a look at that, unquote. So, Joan, how do you think Colonel Vindman's dad would be feeling about the difference between Soviet and American justice today?
Horrified. He would be worried about his son, and I think he would be right. I mean, I don't think that the military is going to retaliate against him. Finally, John Kelly, his former chief of staff, has come out in a speech, I guess it was last night, and defended Vindman and, attacked the notion of retaliation against him. I don't see that happening, but the idea that the president would even suggest the military has him now, it's like what he wants to do with his political opponents. The military has them now. It's chilling to listen to, and I'm sad for the Vindman family.
And we know that 4 Justice Department officials quit the case of Roger Stone, or even, I think, one of them quit their jobs.
Entirely, yes.
This week, after Trump seemed to get Attorney General Barr to lighten the Justice Department sentencing request for Stone, they're saying that they were going to do it anyway. It didn't have to do with Trump's tweets, but it certainly had the appearance of, pressure and Barr getting on board with a political agenda rather than supporting his career justice professionals. How profound a choosing up sides on the rule of law do you see going on down there right now?
I think it's very profound. From what I've read and listened to from U.S. attorneys and former U.S. attorneys talking about what that process would have been like, the decision the sentencing decision is not made arbitrarily by 1 or 2 attorneys. It really is, especially with a high-profile case like that, it really is a department decision. There's a lot of consultation. It's even possible that Barr was consulted and knew about it, could have stopped it, didn't stop it. So it really does have the feeling, if not the absolutely proven fact, that it was, it was justified through this elaborate Justice Department process, and then Trump tweeted and probably called Barr, and then suddenly, this is disproportionate. We won't have this. It's pretty obvious to me, and it's very easy for me to say. I've never had to quit my job in protest of something, but I hope more people have the courage to do that, and then speak about it right away. Thanks, General Kelly, for taking a year to talk about, what you've seen. And thanks, John Bolton. Your book comes out in a month and you wouldn't testify, at least before the House. All these people are going to be judged so harshly by history, especially the ones that get big fat book contracts and keep their mouths shut until that.
Although, as a reality check, Trump has already started to run on the rule of law like he's the one defending it against abuse of power by Congress and what he will call the deep state, justice and intel and foreign service establishments, which he'll say were politicized against him. His people are already calling them. I heard a clip the other day, I don't remember who said it, but somebody called Congress the banana republic.
Right.
And, and then Trump will get some sympathy when he says Roger Stone shouldn't go to jail for 9 years for the nonviolent crimes he commits.
No. Yeah, I don't agree. I mean, he threatened witnesses. I think, I've seen even liberal lawyers say it was somewhat harsh, but not for me.
And the way you do it is if you think the Justice Department sentencing guidelines that are the law
Right.
are too harsh, you look to change the guidelines so they apply equally to everybody, not go get your boy excused from them.
Right. And if you think we should not be sending lethal aid to Ukraine because there's too much corruption, you announce that publicly and you fight the congressional appropriation. But Trump was all for it until he had another agenda.
Last thing, back to the campaign. I see you just dropped a new article in The Nation this morning. Didn't really get to look at it before we came on, but the headline, I love the headline. Democrats should welcome Michael Bloomberg to their debates ASAP. And this is counterintuitive because the debate that we've been having on the show and other people have been having of, what do you mean Michael Bloomberg's going to be allowed into the debate just because he's bought his way in?
Well, I'm sympathetic to that argument. Cory Booker could not, and Julian Castro, no one changed the rules for them. However, the DNC has also always looked at polling, and Bloomberg is climbing in the polls, and he really is the phantom of the primary. He's hiding behind all of these wonderful ads. I love them, don't get me wrong. He's paying staff members unheard of amounts of money. He's hiding behind the endorsements of a growing number of folks in Congress, a growing number of African American leaders. And so he needs to come out from behind all of that and be on a debate stage, frankly, and defend his recent turnaround on stop and frisk when we've got not just this one tape that came out this week. I've been writing about this for years. There are many really disgusting things he said. He's got his good points, but on stop and frisk, he defended it in starkly racial terms multiple times. He's got a very blinkered record in the way he has both spoken about as well as treated his female employees at Bloomberg. There are multiple lawsuits. The AP has just found some comments he made sort of defending redlining, the starving of minority communities from bank loans, and saying that, when they got rid of redlining, that's when we had the banking crisis because a lot of people who didn't deserve mortgages got them. His views on wealth and poverty and income inequality are questionable. He's done great stuff on guns, on gun safety. He's done great stuff on climate. Maybe he has a way of explaining his evolution away from the things that those of us who have doubts about him or what we're concerned about. He's got to be out there talking about it. He's got to talk to the media more. So I just feel like, acting like this isn't happening, la 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 la, is not getting anywhere. And again, if he's the nominee, I will vote for him. But before we get to that point, he's got to face the music just like all these other people have.
And looking back at the years that he was running for mayor, I was involved in televised mayoral debates where we tried and failed to get him to show up.
Yeah.
Because he was not in the campaign finance system with the matching funds because he was spending his own money, so he wasn't required to debate like the other candidates were. And we couldn't get Michael Bloomberg to debate a number of important times. And now it's, what do you mean he's going to be allowed to debate? So, yes, I hear you very much on the other side of that. Let's let Elizabeth Warren and everybody else hold him accountable.
Right. Let's have Elizabeth Warren talk about his record, in the financial industry, et cetera. Let's have, all of them talk about stop and frisk.
Please thank Joan Walsh, national correspondent for The Nation, CNN political contributor and author of the book, What's the Matter with White People? Joan, thank you so much.
Thank you, Brian. Always a pleasure.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live in the green space. Stay with us.
On the next All of It, director Yael Farber joins us to discuss her acclaimed production of Shakespeare's Hamlet at St. Anne's Warehouse, along with Fiona Bell, who plays Hamlet's mother, Gertrude. Plus, we'll take a look at a new exhibit at the Whitney called Vida Americana, which explores the work of Mexican muralists. I'm Allison Stewart. Join me for All of It, weekdays at noon on WNYC.
Support for WNYC comes from Montclair Film, presenting Divas, a dance party, with live performances by Patrick Wilson, Warren Zanes, and Joe McGinty and the Losers Lounge, Saturday, February 22nd at 8 p.m. at the Wellmont Theater in Montclair. The Town Hall, presenting the Lena Horne Prize, celebrating Solange Knowles, with performances by Leon Bridges, Andrew Day, John Batiste, and more, Friday, February 28th at 8 p.m. Tickets at thetownhall.org and Ticketmaster.com. WNYC is a media partner of On Air Fest, featuring The Daily's Michael Barbaro, WNYC's Brian Lehrer, On Being's Krista Tippett, Soundcheck with John Schaefer, and more, March 6th through 8 at Wythe Hotel. Tickets at onairfest.com.
This is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live in the green space today. And again, you can listen to the show as always, but you can also watch the green space video feed when we're down here at WNYC.org. The video stream is right on the homepage at WNYC.org. Joining me next is New York City Council member Brad Lander of Brooklyn, whose bill to get more reckless drivers off the streets was approved by the council this week. The law could result in the most dangerous drivers losing their cars, not just their licenses. And the mayor has indicated that he will sign the bill in its current form at least. So welcome back to the show, Councilmember Lander.
Thank you so much. Really, thank you. It's my first time with you in the green space, and
Absolutely.
very nice to be here.
And politicians are used to this, right? Audiences.
We love it.
But usually they're chanting slogans instead of giving you rounds of applause.
Right.
So this was originally called the Reckless Driver Accountability Act, which sounds straightforward. Accountability for reckless drivers. That's a good thing.
Yes.
But now it's called the Dangerous Vehicle Abatement Law, which sounds like the miscreant is the car. Why the name change?
Yeah, so that's a great question, and you can still call it the Reckless Driving Accountability Act if you want to. We're now calling it DVAP, the Dangerous Vehicle Abatement Program. The real key here is that the camera program with the speed cameras and red lights gives us information on who the most reckless drivers are that we never had before. So we couldn't necessarily have known who was a reckless driver that might injure or kill someone until they did. But now those drivers that get the most red light and speed camera violations, we can identify. The thing is, what you know is the license plate. You don't know who necessarily was driving the car. So the cameras catch the vehicles, and that's what we have. We know that these vehicles are being operated like weapons aimed at our neighbors, and we therefore are treating the vehicle like it's the nuisance. And so the owner of that vehicle is accountable for its action, and most of the time they're going to be the driver. But if there's someone else in their family or their business that's driving, they have a chance to substitute that responsible driver for themselves to take the course that's required. But it's their vehicle that's putting their neighbors in harm's way, and it's therefore the owner that's going to be
So it's kind of the opposite of the NRA's canard. Guns don't kill people, people kill people. Is it your belief that impounding cars is more of a deterrent than points on your license or even suspending your license?
Well, what we really hope here, before you get your car impounded, you're going to have a chance to take a driver accountability program that has been piloted over the last few years at the Red Hook Community Justice Center by the Center for Court Innovation. And they've had pretty good luck with about a 40% reduction in reckless driving recidivism as a result of that course. And I have some quotes from people that have taken it that I can read. I'll just read one of them, because I found this, like, you might think, oh, a course, like I took a safe driving course in high school and that didn't make any difference. But here's a person that said, the video really brought my attention to the possibilities of dangerous driving. I could have hurt families. These are things people don't usually think about when they're in the moment. It's a matter of bad habits that people need to break out of. and now I've become the one sitting with my friends and talking about their reckless driving. I'm the one to tell them to stop, to slow down. I'm definitely working on speeding and dangerous driving in general. Before, I was not thinking about the consequences. And it's different after you've really seen the harm that can be caused. So
are those things people write on an index card as they walk out the door from the course, and then they go, ha, ha, ha.
It's true, although we follow up with them over about a 6-month period. And what we're going to do now, and this is why the backstop of impoundment is important, right? Like the idea here is, let's take a restorative justice approach. Let's try to get people to change their behavior. And if they don't, if they're not willing to change, then we will have to go ahead and impound that car because you can't be operating it like a weapon aimed at your neighbors.
How bad do you have to be for this
Pretty
law
bad.
to kick in for you?
Pretty bad. This we're starting the program, and we're approximating that it'll cover about the 5,000 most reckless drivers each year. And those are folks who have either gotten 5 red light camera violations or 15 speed camera violations. So you have to be a pretty insanely reckless driver to get 15 speed camera violations. And, if you're going to ask, isn't someone who gets 10 speed camera violations reckless? The answer is yes, they are. We want to show that this program works, though. So we're going to start with the 5,000 most reckless vehicles. We're going to gather a lot of data and prove that it works, and then we can expand it further.
You did say 15 or more speed camera
15 or more
violations
speed
or
camera
5
violations.
or more red light camera
right.
violations within 12 months.
That's right. I will tell you that still 5 of my colleagues voted against this bill, and how anyone could say that folks with that track record aren't a danger to their neighbors, I don't know.
And there are 5,000 people like that running around New York City.
5,000 cars. There's 5,000 cars out there today driving around with that reckless a profile.
Listeners, we can take phone calls for City Council Member Brad Lander on this or other things that may be relevant to his work. We will get into a couple of other issues like the coming plastic bag ban, which takes effect in New York for many stores in many situations starting next month. He's been a champion of that cause. And maybe some other things. Our usual phone number is down right now. I'm going to give you an alternative number. So listeners, if you want to call in, it's 212-675-6329, 212-675-6329. And I'll say it even one more time because I know this goes by fast and you don't all walk around with pens. 212-675-6329 if you want to call in and talk to Council Member Brad Lander right now. Staying on this, you first proposed this, I see, after the horrific deaths of those 2 little children in your district.
That's right.
Would you remind people of that incident, and would this law have prevented that?
Yeah. So 2 years ago on March 5th, 2018, a reckless driver with a history of speed camera and red light violations blew through the intersection of 5th Avenue and 9th Street, right downstairs from where my district office is, and killed 4-year-old Abigail Blumenstein and 1-year-old Josh Liu, and hit their Abigail's pregnant mom as well, lost the baby that she was carrying. And that just broke the hearts of everyone in the neighborhood, as all these crashes too. I mean, there's 400 New Yorkers we've lost in traffic crashes in the last 2 years since then. And we've done a lot to try to make our streets safer. We reduced the speed limit. We've re-engineered a lot of intersections and roadways. We've built this camera program out. But what that crash called our attention to is what we have not done yet is focused on the very most reckless drivers, and this was one of them. And if we had intervened with her as a result of her camera violation history, maybe we could have gotten her, either taken her car or gotten her to change her behavior before that happened. Obviously, we'll never know if we could have. She had 5 violations, a mix of red light and speed camera. I will say that the speed cameras are now expanding massively from where they used to be. We had 140 of them. We're going up to 750. And they're going to be on many more hours of the day. So there'll be about 10 times as much speed camera ticket writing as there was when that driver had gotten her record. So.
I didn't know about this hours of the day thing. You mean they turned speed cameras off for part of the day? Why would that be?
Well, now they're on a lot more than they used to. Albany was very restrictive about what we could do. They would only let us have the 140 cameras, and the same law said they can only be on during school hours. And now the new law that was passed last April said you can go from 140 to 750, which covers, we've got about 1,600 schools, but still that covers most of the school zones in the city. And they let them be on, I don't remember the exact hours, but most of the hours that people are.
So
are driving.
originally Albany said you can put adults' lives in danger. It's okay, just not kids.
Yeah.
I see the mayor's support for this law came with some reworking from the original conception. And some critics have called it watering it down. What changed to get the mayor's approval?
Yeah, two things. First, getting the legal framework right is important. The Fourth Amendment protects Americans from unreasonable search and seizure of their property. And, pursuant to the last conversation you just had, we want those protections in place to protect the civil liberties of Americans. So we had to add a set of due process steps, which sound crazy when you're talking about someone that has sped 15 times, but still, you want to make sure they have adequate due process and an opportunity to appeal in court. And so there's a set of legal issues. And then, we had hoped to have the program go into place covering maybe 20,000 vehicles in working with the Department of Transportation and with the Law Department. We decided it'd be good to start at 5,000. We really want to prove this works. It's crazy that this is true, but we can't find any city around the country that has a program like this. And we really want to make sure we can prove that it works, that we actually get impact. We reduce reckless driving, we save lives, we prevent crashes.
You ready for a skeptic? Line 1, Desiree in Brooklyn. You're on WNYC with Brad Lander. Hi, Desiree.
Good morning. Good morning, Brian. I think the reason that the councilman can't find another city that has this is because what they're doing sounds like it's unconstitutional. Because I can't think of any law, traffic violation law that the state has that targets a vehicle as opposed to the driver. The whole point of, what makes it able to be enforced and makes it constitutional and pass muster in the court is the fact that you're targeting the person who actually did it, while this law is targeting whoever happens to be in the car in the time, even if it's a rental car or a zip car or something like that, and you have like a dozen different drivers who could be in the car on any given day. And I think they're not looking at that and looking at the fact that this could be a problem, and you're also targeting a person's ability to drive by doing this without giving them the proper constitutional protections, because you don't know who's driving. You're only targeting a vehicle. The only thing that legally is able to target a vehicle like that is a parking ticket. Traffic violations should not be able to do that. And I have a feeling that and I totally understand wanting to get reckless drivers off the street, and I applaud that. But I think that when this hits the courts, there's going to be a problem.
So we've spent a lot of time with the lawyers in the law department, in the city council. I'm confident this will stand up to legal scrutiny. We care a lot about those constitutional rights. If you own that vehicle, you have a responsibility for how it's operated. And if you've got a fleet and you're the owner of that fleet, then you have a responsibility to make sure that the drivers who drive your cars do it responsibly. If you are a zip car, company, and you note that one of your cars is being driven very recklessly over and over and over again, then you got to take a look in and see what's going on. Most of the folks we're talking about, I think, are probably the drivers of those vehicles. But you actually, as the owner, when you get that notice that your vehicle has entered the Dangerous Vehicle Abatement Program, can go to oath and say, this other person is the responsible driver. They're going to be substituted in to take the course. So there's a range of things you can do to make sure your constitutional rights are respected. But as owner, you've got a responsibility for getting that vehicle.
Let's take one more call on this, and then I want to touch on a few other things with you before we run out of time. Line 2, Jason in Brooklyn. You're on WNYC. Hi, Jason.
Hello. Thank you for taking my call. Can you hear me?
Can hear just fine.
Wonderful. So my question, if you take the cars from people, I'm assuming that they're not going to be releasing cars back to these people for free. So what is the cost now of this? How much money is the city planning on raising from taking people's cars, unless they're going to give them back for free?
Are you skeptical that this is being done for the revenue, Jason?
It sounds like one of those. It sounds like it. Yeah, it sounds like the revenue.
So this one, I think I can maybe even address to your satisfaction. If you take the course, The course is offered for free, and we thought about whether we should charge for the course, but we really did not want it to have, this is not to collect revenue, this is not to distinguish people who have money from don't have money. This is to change people's driving behaviors before they injure or kill, our loved ones. So when you get that notice, first I will say every one of these tickets is $50, so you're better off if you don't get them anyway. But when you get the notice that your vehicle has become a dangerous vehicle, if you sign up for the course, you can take the course and you don't have to pay anything. And if you then keep your record clean, we'll clear it, and you can start over again as a non-reckless driver. If you refuse to take the course, if you just ignore the notice, refuse the course, don't go to oath to have a hearing, then yes, eventually the sheriff will come boot your car. Even once your car is booted, you have about 48 hours to register for the course. Then you do have to pay the boot fee, but that really just covers the booting. And then yes, if after that 48 hours you haven't signed up for the course and paid the boot fee, then your car will be impounded. And you're right, once that happens, you start having to pay the costs in the tow lot, but there are so many opportunities to get right before that happens.
My guest is New York City Council member Brad Lander from Brooklyn. We've got a few more minutes with him, and I'm going to tick through a few topics to finish this up. And first, the state law banning plastic bags
Hooray.
For most uses is about to go into effect.
It's only taken 7 years. It's not like we have a climate crisis.
Informal, unofficial, thoroughly unscientific poll finds you have 80% for this law among Green Space audience members. So March 1st, that's soon, and it's a cause you had championed, but the state government had blocked. Now it is happening, and the state law gave cities the option of imposing a fee on paper bags too, and New York City did. So what exactly are people going to find in the grocery stores starting March 1st?
Yeah, it's a good question. I'm thrilled we're finally there. It is still true of over the past year, New York City residents sent about 10 billion single-use plastic bags to landfill. A few of them get reused, but most of them just wind up in trees and the storm drains and landfills. They're made from petroleum. The evidence about what they're doing in the oceans is really just brutal. So starting March 1st, there will not be plastic bags in the grocery stores at all, or there aren't supposed to be. You can let your bodega owner, your grocery store owner know and make sure that they're ready to comply.
How about takeout food from restaurants?
Takeout food from restaurants still is allowed. You will still see plastic bags there, but not in retail stores, not in grocery stores, not in bodegas.
How about the produce section?
And the produce section can still have the role of plastic bags. So there's still an awful lot of single-use plastics in our lives, but it could be 10 billion fewer just in New York City plastic bags and about 3 times that around the state. And then, as you're right, a thing we're doing here that is happening in some other jurisdictions, but not every part of the state, is if you'll just bring your reusable WNYC bags that a lot of you have, or the city is giving away hundreds and hundreds, millions, I think even, of really good reusable bags, then you don't have to pay anything at all. If you need paper bags, they are going to charge a nickel for them because, in part, the paper bags are actually a lot more expensive for the stores to buy. But also, our goal is not just to get people to switch to paper. Paper's not a petroleum product, so it's better than plastic, but most paper bags still actually wind up getting thrown away in the trash rather than recycled. And this is just an area where it is so easy for us to become a group of reusers. You don't have a disposable wallet every day or a disposable key holder or a disposable briefcase. There's all kinds of things you just get in the habit of bringing, and shopping bags are an easy one of those.
I'm thinking of this old Richard Nixon line where he was defending against the scandal, and he was talking about his wife wearing a good cloth Republican coat. So we have a good cloth WNYC
exactly
reusable bag that we give away to members. We'll save that for the next pledge drive. But I guess the other thing about that is that people can even buy reusable bags for the produce. Right, they sell these things. I think some of them are like netting in a certain way.
Yeah.
So that's just another way that people who are really concerned about, minimizing their use of plastic, single-use plastic, can get around it.
More and more people are going to reusable water bottles, and the city just agreed that we'll stop buying single-use plastic water bottles. The plastics crisis, it's not going to end the climate crisis, but what we are doing to our oceans right now with microplastics is really a big part of what is what is the threat, and those are the changes we need to make.
Now, you were an affordable housing advocate before running for council, and here we are more than a dozen years later with that still the number one issue in the city.
Yep.
And next year's 3 top mayoral hopefuls so far, I think it's fair to call them that, Corey Johnson, Eric Adams, Scott Stringer, all stepping out on the issue already with policy proposals. I'm curious for you, with your long view, how you would compare Mayor Bloomberg's and Mayor de Blasio's records on this.
Yeah. First, I will say, I'd like to imagine a world where we got the tenant protections in place a long time ago, because we need some more units of housing in this city as the city has grown and supply hasn't kept pace. But because we left so many tenants vulnerable to displacement for all those years, I think people were really traumatized and therefore see development as threatening. And now finally last year in Albany, because we got Democrats in the state Senate, we strengthened the rent laws. Now that still only covers regulated tenants. We still have about 1 million unregulated rental tenants who don't have any protection. So to me, it's like if we had gotten tenants protected first, our ability to have a smart policy to think about growth might have been a lot better than it is. But so that's one thing I wish we could have done differently. In terms of going forward, we still have to protect those unregulated tenants. And then I do think there are ways to change the conversation about growth in ways that could just work better. If people could see, the kind of homeownership that Mitchell Lama represented, or the Penn South co-ops right near here, where working class families had an opportunity to buy a co-op unit, resell it for a modest gain, maybe you would think, all right, that's the kind of housing I could get behind. If we planned a little more collectively for the city, so you just didn't feel like a developer was coming at you, but we're thinking across the city about what the broad growth needs are. I'm pushing for the city to have a kind of a comprehensive plan we develop once every 10 years, so we could balance those hard challenges and then have a smarter conversation about where that growth should take place.
You were a founder of Council's Progressive Caucus in 2009, I think it was, the year Mike Bloomberg got council to suspend term limits so he could run for a third term. So you were extremely familiar with his policies over a number of years.
Indeed.
And I imagine sometimes a supporter and sometimes a critic.
That's right.
Based on your experience, what kind of a president do you think he would make?
All right. I should say I was the first elected official in New York State to endorse Elizabeth Warren. I remain a strong Elizabeth Warren supporter, and I still think she would be the best president of the United States in my lifetime. So I want to be really clear about that. You're right. There were things. Look, I picked up the plastic bag issue from Mike Bloomberg. So on environment issues, obviously on gun violence, there's a set of issues he's strong on. But boy, the fight about stop and frisk in particular and discriminatory policing in New York City, it was not just he stayed with it too long. I mean, even as 700,000 people were being stopped, 90+% people of color, 90+% folks without reasonable suspicion who hadn't done anything wrong, they really demonized the effort to make change. Joined with the police union, ran ads, targeted elected officials, made it seem like elected officials of color weren't worried about crime in their own neighborhoods. It was done in a way that was really hurtful and harmful. And, one speech in Queens is not quite enough to take seriously.
Does he listen to people? Is he open to different points of view? Does he deliberate well?
I wish we could see some of that on the campaign trail. Like part of what people are frustrated by with a campaign that is based on spending billions of dollars on ads rather than engaging in democratic dialogue with people is it's hard to know exactly the answers to those questions.
Let me get my legal ID in here, and then I'm going to ask you one last question. This is WNYC FM, HD, and AM New York, WNJT FM, 88.1 Trenton, WNJP, 88.5 Sussex, WNJY, 89.3 Netcong, and WNJO, 90.3 Toms River. We are in New York and New Jersey, public radio. There, audience, you never thought you came to the green space to hear somebody read a long legal ID for the FCC, but the rule is you have to do it between 3 minutes before the hour and 3 minutes after the hour. So we snuck it in there before we finish up with Brad Lander. And still on Team Bloomberg, or related to Team Bloomberg, they placed into the universe this idea of Andrew Yang for mayor next year.
Oh, we think that came from
I thought
Team Bloomberg.
that came from Howard
Interesting. I
Wolfson.
hadn't
Maybe
seen
I'm
that.
wrong. Maybe
No,
it came
that could
from
be.
Yang himself, and Wolfson just gave him a little shout out. But it seems to be attributing, and what I'm seeing, but nevertheless, Team Bloomberg seems somewhat enthusiastic. And I thought, maybe if we do attribute it to Team Mike, here he goes like he did 3 times himself, sidelining the mainstream elected Democrats who've been working their way up toward this. Maybe Yang is more businessy. Do you think that's it? I mean, he's also kind of socialist with his universal basic income provided by the government. So I don't know. How do you see the Bloomberg-Yang intersection for mayor?
Wow. All right. I've not been asked that before. I mean, obviously there's something around tech and the idea that sort of tech and entrepreneurial creativity have some role to play. And, obviously we value entrepreneurialism and technology and what it can do for us. But I think it does go to what I was saying before. I mean, what I think we need to be doing right now is strengthening the democratic muscles. Like, to me, what's behind the weaknesses that Trump exposed is our failures of democracy, our failures of people to engage in different kinds of democratic practices. And those are at every level. That's your school PTA and your city council, as well as presidential politics. And when things devolve to maybe some tech genius or some billionaire can solve our problems, I think we'll wind up disappointed.
We will follow that. And we should say that your next plans have already been announced. I see you're going to run, your term limited.
That's right.
And so you're running for New York City Comptroller next year. That's official, right?
Yes, that's official.
So we're going to have you back and hold you accountable. Like, can an activist like you be trusted to manage our money?
Love it. Those are exactly the right
questions.
questions. Yes, we're debating between 2 bumper stickers: accounting for our values and the Comptroller's office. Boring, but important.
Please thank Brad Lander for coming to the Green Space. Thank you so much. And now, live from the Green Space stage, it's time for the latest news with Richard Hake.
Hi, Brian. U.S. officials have announced the country's 15th confirmed case of the coronavirus. This is an evacuee from China who had been under quarantine in Texas. The person is in stable condition, and also Japan announced its first death hours after confirming 44 cases on that cruise ship that's quarantined near Tokyo. China is reporting total deaths now at more than 1,300, with confirmed cases exceeding 59,000. Governor Cuomo is scheduled to meet with President Trump at 3 this afternoon about allowing state residents to once again enroll in trusted traveler programs. The governor says he's willing to allow the federal government to access DMV records, but only for applicants. He told CNN this morning that the issue is not the only one that he'll bring up with the president.
I want to make sure the president knows that his Department of Homeland Security is extorting other governments. They said they're going to punish governments that don't get in line with their dictate. They're hurting hundreds of thousands of people.
Earlier this week, BuzzFeed obtained a Department of Homeland Security memo with plans on how to punish states that blocked federal immigration. Immigration and Customs Enforcement wants a federal judge here in Manhattan to dismiss a lawsuit challenging its ability to arrest people in and around courthouses. WNYC's Beth Fertig reports.
ICE lost its attempt to dismiss a very similar case by the New York Attorney General and the Brooklyn DA, who claim its arrests interfere with immigrants' rights to go to court. But the agency is also being sued by organizations representing immigrants. At a hearing before the judge in this case, government lawyers argued the groups don't have legal standing to sue. For example, they said the New York Immigration Coalition didn't suffer any harm from the arrests because it's an advocacy group. But an attorney representing the groups said the coalition was harmed because it's diverted resources to educating immigrants about the risks of going to court.
The New York State Assembly Speaker says he needs more data on how the state's bail reform laws are working before he'll even consider some revisions proposed by Democrats. The proposal by Senate Democrats would end all cash bail, but give judges more discretion over who should be released after an arrest. But Speaker Carl Hastie says he's not on board with any rollback of the law quite yet.
I can't say what we will do, won't do, look at, won't look at until I know how the law is working. It's like I have to grade the exam before I can determine, where we have to look.
The law went into effect on January 1st and ended most forms of cash bail for nonviolent offenses. Police and prosecutors say it's leading to repeat offenders being released and committing more crimes. And a controversial plan to build a high-rise next to the Brooklyn Botanic Garden is back before a court this morning. Activists are suing the city and developer Cornell Realty Management for rezoning a part of Prospect Lefferts Gardens to allow two 16-story residential towers to be built. Officials at the garden say it would cast a shadow on some of the plant collections. A study conducted by the developer says there would not be a significant impact. The Brooklyn Supreme Court judge could rule today on whether the lawsuit can continue. We'll have periods of rain today, highs near 51 degrees. It does drop down to freezing tonight, 32 degrees with clearing skies. Tomorrow we'll see sun, but it gets colder throughout the day. The temperature is expected to be around 30 degrees by late afternoon. That's the latest from the WNYC Newsroom. Live on the Green Space, I'm Richard Hake.
Next time on Studio 360, the magic that brought us Yanni and John Tesh.
I realized that if I was going to have a real full-time music career, that it was going to have to be some big event.
The unlikely vehicle to stardom in the 1990s, PBS pledge drives.
What I needed was something like a PBS special to make a whole bunch of loud noise.
That's next time on Studio 360. Tonight at 8 on 93.9 FM, WNYC.
WNYC is supported by the Visiting Nurse Service of New York. VNSNY provides nurses, therapists, and home health aides and helps your loved ones stay out of the hospital and get the care they need at home. Learn more at vnsny.org. Neon presenting Portrait of a Lady on Fire, a love story set in 18th century France about an affair between an artist and her female subject, opens in select theaters this Friday with opening weekend appearances with director Celine Sciamma. The New Jersey Performing Arts Center presenting The Chieftains on Sunday, March 5th at 3 p.m. Fiddling couple Natalie McMaster and Donald Leahy join as guests for the evening. Tickets at njpac.org. Leadership support for WNYC comes from the Jerome L. Green Foundation, a proud supporter of New York City's major cultural institutions, providing scholarships in the arts, education, and medicine.
It's the Brian Lehrer Show on WNYC. Good morning again, everyone. We are live in the Green Space today, and when we are live in the Green Space, you can watch the show as well as listen. We have a Green Space video stream right on the homepage of the WNYC website. So if you want to watch the show, you can go to WNYC.org, and it's right there. Now, a recent article in the New York Times has been getting shared a lot in parenting circles. It's the one about one mother's decision not to give her 11-year-old a smartphone and how that was recently put to the test. Social media and even our own office conversations reveal many different opinions, especially as parents try to navigate raising a child in a big city. Joining me now is the writer of the article, Michaela Birmingham, writer, director, and executive producer at Scary Mommy, which is an entertainment and media destination for moms. Her latest piece in the Times is called My Phoneless 11-Year-Old Was Lost in Manhattan and Survived. Please welcome Michaela Birmingham to the Green Space. So I see you have a 10-year-old and an 11-year-old, and neither have smartphones. You write, on the 6th grade circuit, this decision is about as far from cool as you can get. What went into your decision?
Well, I just started seeing the kids getting phones at an earlier and earlier age. You know, 3rd grade, 4th graders, even some kindergarten students were coming to school with phones, and it gave me pause. And I just said, our family's gonna hold off, and we're gonna try and delay this device until we think that it's appropriate.
What do you tell your kids when they say, probably accurately, that everyone else in the class has a smartphone?
Yes, that is a common statement that we hear a lot. And I say, well, we're not everybody else, and I really don't care what everybody else has, but, our family is going to make our own decisions based on what we think is best for you.
And what do you think the criteria are? Is it purely age of the kid? I don't think it's right until 8th grade or something like that. Or does it depend on the individual? How are you weighing factors like those?
Well, yeah, I think there's a movement right now called Wait Until 8th. There's a group of parents who have started this kind of pact among other families in their schools to agree to wait. And if a large group of cohort of kids wait, there's really no one to text and no one to, feel left out. So that's one strategy. But I really think there's no magic number. I think it depends on the child. It depends on your needs. Every kid is different. And, there's a lot of kids turning 12 and getting a phone for their birthday. Today's actually my daughter's 12th birthday. She's not getting a phone. But, I don't think it should be a gift, frankly. I don't think it should be given as a gift. It's a tool. It's a communication tool, and it's not a present. It's something that one day when it's needed, we'll decide to get one, but it's not going to be a present.
Is your concern more what they might be exposed to on social media or elsewhere on the web, or is it more of an issue of screen time, per se, that worries you the most?
I think it's both. I think it's the way that kids remove themselves from the real world when they're looking at a screen, whether it's alone, crossing the road, not paying attention. I mean, we were just hearing from Brad about traffic accidents and all of that. I mean, frankly, that is a real concern for parents once their children start to travel alone. It's certainly social media, all of the imagery that they're exposed to. It's the internet. It's the entire world at their fingertips at, a very young age. The New York Times has a very interesting interactive picture of the brain of a young person. And if you look at the frontal lobe where, decisions and cognitive abilities exist, it's not formed. It's not even fully formed until in your 20s. And so to give, an 8, 9, 10-year-old a phone and say, okay, use this responsibly, we're effectively saying, your brain isn't ready physically to allow you to make these decisions well, but try your best.
Listeners, we're going to open the phones on this, and we would love to hear from parents out there who are currently dealing with this issue or who have recently dealt with this issue. Did you wait to get your kids smartphones until a certain age, until a certain level of maturity, as judged by you, until you thought, okay, this is, a lifeline in case of an emergency? Was it a circumstance like that pushed you to buy the gadget? Was it peer pressure? Do you think you see the way in which not having a smartphone has helped your child in any way, if they don't, or the opposite? Give us a call. We have not our usual phone number right now because our usual line is down. So you can call 212-675-6329 if you have a story, quick story, or a question for our guest, Michaela Birmingham, who has that piece in the Times called My Phoneless 11-Year-Old Was Lost in Manhattan and Survived, and we're going to get to that story. But the phone number again, 212-675-6329, 212-675-6329. So your decision to keep your kids away from cell phones was put to the test. You want to set the scene for us?
Sure. So I have two daughters. My younger one had hurt her hand playing hockey. She had a broken hand, and I had to take her all the way uptown to get it reset in the ER. And my older one, the 11-year-old at the time, was at swim practice downtown. And of course, my husband was out of town at the time, which always happens when you have, disasters like this. So I had told my daughter, when you're done swim practice, call me from the desk, and I'll let you know how long I'm going to be at the hospital. It wasn't clear if I was going to be there for a couple hours or maybe all night. And so it was looking like I was probably going to be there all night. And so I had reached out to another mom who lived close to her swimming practice, and I said, can my daughter come over, hang out with you guys, probably sleep over because I'm going to be here for a long time. She was at work and said, sure, my nanny is nearby. I'll, put you guys in touch, and they can meet up, as she was on her way to pick up the other kid. So my daughter calls me, and we had worked out this plan that she was going to walk 2 blocks to a Starbucks that we pass all the time. It's regularly on her route. She was going to go to that Starbucks and wait to get picked up by the babysitter. It's New York. There are a lot of Starbucks. So what happened was I got a text from the babysitter 30 minutes after they were supposed to meet saying, I've been in Starbucks for 30 minutes and I don't see your daughter. And I just panicked and thought, oh my gosh, Then all of the why everyone else has a phone, words kept swirling around my head, thinking, okay, there's your plan just blew up. You should have just given her a phone. And I just, it was terrible. So a few minutes later, seemed like forever, I got a call from an unknown number, and I'm thinking, oh God, who is this? The police? Like, who is it? And it was my daughter, and she was totally calm, not at all panicked, and she was like, hi, Mom. She's like, I waited in Starbucks forever. I ordered a drink. They got my drink wrong. So she's like, I didn't think anyone in here was going to help me. So I left and I went to the building lobby that had a doorman next to Starbucks. And I'm using the phone at the desk. And I was like, you nailed it. Amazing. Look at that. You used common sense. And so for me, it was, and the babysitter was actually around the corner at a different Starbucks. So they connected and it was all fine. Nobody was kidnapped. It was wonderful. But what I learned was, the value of her being aware and having her eyes and, ears open and to assessing a situation where maybe, a busy Starbucks with people who are not paying too much attention to the whatever mango tea she ordered would not be the best option for someone to look for help. And so she navigated the situation. She walked, around the corner and found a responsible adult, have to have the confidence to ask a stranger to, let them use the phone. And I think those are all important life lessons. And it showed me that, she's going to be just fine.
So, mango tea, because you did get me thinking, which is worse for an 11-year-old, a smartphone or coffee?
Right. Next episode.
But you're speaking to a lot of parents who give their kids phones maybe a little earlier than they would otherwise, out of fear or out of the sense that it's aligned to them and it makes them safer, especially in the city.
Yeah, I hear that a lot. Safety. They're in 6th grade now. They're walking home by themselves. They're taking the train alone. I want to know where they are every second of the day. I want to track them. It's going to make them safer. Does it really make them safer? I don't know. Maybe 350 kids get kidnapped every year in the U.S. Over 5,000 commit suicide. The mental health impacts that we don't yet fully understand from social media and from all of these images, especially for young girls, they're pretty alarming. So I feel like maybe if we're thinking about safety, we should consider, the unknown impacts of what these devices are doing to our kids.
I think we have a follow-up on that from a phone caller. Line 1, Ben in Astoria. You're on WNYC. Hi, Ben.
Hi, Brian. Thank you very much for taking this call. This is a subject which is near and dear to my heart because I've got an 8th grader, a 13-year-old, who, as this lady says, has a brain that's not fully developed yet. And he cannot distinguish between what he is absorbing and thinks is cool for him and what is really appropriate. I'll just give you a couple of examples. One is his overuse of the phone. No matter how much I try to limit it, he resists. He can no longer take his phone to school as a result because he was pulling it out in classroom. And so that's been banned on it for most of the day. But the problem is what happens when he gets home. And one of the things I want to mention, which I think all parents need to be aware of, is that there are websites out there that are downright dangerous. And I found out about one yesterday. It's called Discord, which allows conversations with strangers. And many of them, as it turns out, and I actually saw this, are either pedophiles or are peddling sexual content. And the kids don't know how to actually react to this and say no.
But Ben,
I want to put that out there.
One thing about that,
I think giving an 8th grader a phone on hindsight is not a good idea.
You have to educate your kids anyway about, spotting danger online and what danger looks like and because he's going to be on the internet, whether or not he takes a phone to school. Your kid's going to use the internet, right? And there's a whole school of thought that says the issue should not be restriction so much as education. And you're going to have to do the education anyway. You ever thought about that?
I haven't thought about it enough yet. I'm not exactly sure how to educate my 8th grader into what is appropriate, what is right, and what is dangerous.
I'm glad you, and I'm going to leave it there for time, but Ben, you raised such an important set of issues. Michaela, what do you think about that sort of restriction versus education question?
I think education is key. And certainly, we're not the pioneer household. Like, my kids have internet at school. They have a very, thoughtful, gradual introduction to technology. They start with an email address that's only accessible within the school. They can email teachers and fellow students and no one else. And they go through a whole digital citizenship contract with their teachers and their school. The parents have all the passwords to everything. I mean, it's a process. You have to educate them. They're learning about how to go to a website and understand if the information you're reading on that website is from a reliable source, which is important. They have to understand how to, look at information and figure out, is this okay? Or is this conversation I'm having with a person who has no photo, is that a good thing to do? And so I think it's definitely key for parents.
Listener tweets us, we gave our son a non-smartphone for emergencies, no smartphone until he was a junior in high school. So what about type of phone?
Type of phone is a great option. We're actually right now in that process where we're trying to decide which dumb phone, if you want to call it that, or flip phone we're going to get. Because sure, I would love my daughter to be able to call me and without having to ask the receptionist at the school to borrow her phone. That's key. But I think that I'm fine with it not having a screen and having, the ability to do very simple things, maybe play music, and that's about it.
Do you and your husband have smartphones and use social media?
We do, and ironically, my day job is focused around making people look at their phones for as long as possible, as often as possible. So I really do truly understand how these are, everything we look at is engineered to make you addicted to watch it. So I'm no stranger to, how there are so many wonderful things to be had on these devices, but also I think we need to really take a pause and think about when it's appropriate for our kids.
You're an executive producer, I see, at Scary Mommy, an entertainment and media destination for moms. So yeah, you're trying to provide a service, I'm sure, but you're also trying to get clicks.
Yeah, we create videos, and there are ways to edit a video so that people will stay and watch it. And, when you're looking at a feed, there are specific techniques used to make a person stop and pause and look and watch that video, which we do every day. So it's a real thing. And our kids are now the guinea pigs for all of that.
So how do you model, good relationship with your screens at home for your kids?
Well, we have a pretty strict no phones at the table rule. So for my husband and I, we don't allow the phones at the dinner table. I try really hard to not be on my phone when I'm around my kids, just because I like it to be, our time together. We ride the subway to school. I don't take out my phone unless I need like a direction or something, urgent. But yeah, it's hard. It's hard for all of us. Even as adults, it's hard to monitor our usage and to, sometimes you're in the car and you're sitting there and someone's talking to you and you're like, yeah, and then you realize you've just been sucked in. So to ask that of a young kid, I think is unrealistic.
Another story of getting lost without a phone and surviving from a listener who tweets, when our daughter was 6, she got separated from the sitter when getting on the train. She always had one of my business cards, showed it to someone, and they called me.
Great. Love that.
So,
they use common sense. We've forgot about common sense, I think.
We're almost out of time. How's the reaction been to your article? Are you getting mostly love because every parent in the world who has kids your kid's age is dealing with this? Or are you also getting pushback like, come on, don't be so electronically prudish about this, or whatever they'd say?
I think it's a bit of both. I think I've gotten a lot of nice emails and notes from families around the world who are going through this struggle. And, it's not cool to be the one who's out there, the mom of the only kid or the only 2 kids in the grade without a phone. So yeah, I'm not Beyonce on the mom circuit by any stretch. But and there's also the people who think I'm crazy and that think that, we should just hand it over and give the world to the kids right away. But that's the other lesson that I try and tell my daughters, is that your opinion sometimes won't be popular, and that's okay. and that it's okay to sometimes swim against the tides. And one day you're going to be stronger for it.
Which is a good thing to model for all kinds of purposes. Yeah. All right. Michaela Birmingham, writer-director and executive producer at Scary Mommy, an entertainment and media destination for moms. Maybe you saw her piece in the New York Times called My Phoneless 11-Year-Old Was Lost in Manhattan and Survived. Please thank Michaela for coming to the Green Space.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC. Coming up next, we will have an exit interview, you might call it, with Robert Krulwich from Radiolab, who is retiring. Stay with us.
At WNYC, we're committed to bringing you honest reporting that addresses issues from a wide range of perspectives. With so much uncertainty in the world, independent journalism from WNYC and NPR is as important as it's ever been. But to live up to our commitment, we need you. Make a donation today. Call 888-376-WNYC or go to WNYC.org and click on Donate.
WNYC supporters include Second Stage Theater's Grand Horizons, a new play with Jane Alexander and James Cromwell, now on Broadway at the Hayes Theater through March 1st. Tickets are available at 2st.com. Juilliard. David Robertson conducts the Juilliard Orchestra in Mahler's Fifth Symphony, Tuesday, February 25th at 8 p.m. at Carnegie Hall. Tickets at juilliard.edu/calendar.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, and we will end the show today with a treat that is also bittersweet. Robert Krulwich, co-host of Radiolab, is retiring. Now, we and millions of listeners will miss him dearly. But to mark the occasion, we have invited Robert to join us here in the Green Space this morning to play a few clips from his radio and television career and talk about migrating through the media landscape from around the time of Watergate until today. So please welcome Robert Krulwich to the Green Space. And I guess this is a good time to remind those of you listening on the radio, if you want to actually see Robert Krulwich's face, you can, because we stream live video when we're in the Green Space. You can watch the show. Just go to WNYC.org, the homepage of the station, and you will see a live video stream that you can click on, WNYC.org. So I'm going to play a piece of audio right from the get-go.
Okay.
Robert, here to give people who only know you from WNYC a sample of your past creativity. And control room, let's make sure we have the right one queued up first. It's the one from 1974 on Pacifica Radio. The Richard Nixon impeachment process was starting, and Robert was part of a skit intended to explain the impeachment process. This begins with a fictional protest outside the White House where a guy named Bob Zarola has vowed to stand on his head until Nixon is gone. But he's a little confused as he talks to fictional journalist Frank Capo.
Well, Frank, I have pledged to stay on my head until Richard Nixon is impeached and has to leave the White House. And until that happens, I am going to stay here day and night, symbolizing everyone in America who wants to see Nixon impeached and out.
An absolutely amazing protest statement. Bob Zarola just says that he will be on his head, not only through the impeachment of the president, but through the trial as well. That means he will be on his head outside the White House for months and...
Wait a second, what do you mean through the trial as well? All I said was I'll be on my head till he's impeached and out. That's all.
The young man stands on his head for 27 days, and unfortunately, tragically even, he does not know the meaning of the word impeachment.
Oh, okay, which
That's
one?
a real oldie.
Which one were you in that?
I was all of those people.
Oh.
Yes. I mean, the original thought was it was the first time anyone had been impeached for about 100 years. Andrew Johnson was the previous one. There weren't a lot of people in America who remembered that. And everybody thought impeachment out. Like when you were impeached, you were probably in jail or something. And so I wanted a way to just first of all, capture people's attention, and then hold it, and then teach them a lesson. And Mr. whatever his name is, Capo, learned the lesson in a muscular sort of way. I had an obsession at the time with a particular sportscaster who was
you were doing Howard Cosell.
Yes, yeah. I did Howard Cosell over and over. On Pacific, I was Howard Cosell about a third of the time, for no particular reason. And I don't even know whether a lot of people knew who it was. A vaguely Howard Cosell.
There would only have been a certain overlap between Pacifica listeners and Howard Cosell listeners.
Right? Exactly.
Now, of course, we seem to have impeachments every few presidents.
Yes.
Do you think, and this is a serious question for you as a journalist, that the standards for that are being lowered, or are the presidents we're electing, Nixon, Clinton, Trump, just a bigger group of scoundrels?
I mean, that's a hard one to... for me, the issue is always when something new happens, when, a telephone call that had always been 15 cents suddenly becomes a quarter and then more. And so suddenly inflation, a phrase you'd heard but you didn't know very well, or OPEC increases the price of oil. So when something new enters the ordinary life of people, whether it's just changes in banking and they give you a card to put into a machine instead of meeting Mrs. Jones, the teller you've had all your life. Over my life, as each one of these sort of basically richly different changes take place in an ordinary life, I like to go in and say, why is that happening? And then explain to people as best I can what the deeper meaning of this shift is. And it has remained for the whole 40-year run. It's just a wonderful way to wake up in the morning. Like, what is it that pricks me as different today, and what's behind the change? That's really the...
And so this kind of thing has been your MO in pretty much all of your jobs, trying to explain a serious thing, but frequently using some kind of performance art, like we heard in that clip.
A lot of, it's a funny thing. In a biography I read of Abraham Lincoln, he was explaining to someone who asked him why he wasn't more scolding and more argumentative, why he told so many stories. Lincoln said to this fellow, he says, I've found over my career that if I tell a short story in plain language with humor added, it somehow lodges in the person's head and changes them in a softer and yet more lasting way. It's just my experience. So yes, I know how to hector, I know how to command a room in different ways, but this is the way that works softly and best. Actually, softly and hard. It makes a hard difference. And I've found the same thing. I've had lots of news directors. At Pacifica in particular, there was a guy in Los Angeles who just hated that I would go to humor. And I could see, without actually seeing, the jugular vein in his neck as he cried out. He was Australian. He says, "The news is not funny, Bob! It's not funny!" And that has been a kind of a mantra that has followed me along. But I don't. The funny is actually serious for me. And
here's another example of Robert being creative and Control Room. This is the one where he's on television in 1992. This is about a serious thing also. Bill Clinton has just been elected president. You're on CBS this morning with
Well, you
Paul
really did
Azan.
research here. Yeah.
Oh, you gave me all these clips. And you're explaining a big problem with the economy that Clinton is inheriting after 12 years of Reagan and Bush, and you do it with the characters Wayne and Garth from Wayne's World.
Yeah.
This is a generation, meet the 18 to 29-year-olds like Wayne and his friend Garth, who are, convinced that it's their destiny to become poorer.
And it's Wayne and his friends, speaking metaphorically, of course, that President Clinton will have to address today. Because when you talk about solving the long-term problems of America, they've got the problems that he is trying to solve.
It's not like this generation hasn't tried to do everything right. Like everybody, they look for work.
I've had plenty of Joe jobs. Nothing I'd call a career.
In fact, unemployment among 20 to 24-year-olds is 12%. That's almost twice the national average.
Let me put it this way. I have an extensive collection of name tags and hairnets.
And it's true, there are far fewer good jobs with good pay and a benefit package than there used to be. And then there's housing.
Okay, I still live with my parents, which I admit is both bogus and sad.
And not that unusual. 50% more 25 to 34-year-olds now live with their parents, which, by the way, saves money. Also, compared to their parents, Wayne's generation has children later and stays single longer.
Garth, marriage is punishment for shoplifting in some countries.
So they let you do that on CBS, explain unemployment with Wayne's World characters?
I have had a perpendicular relationship with most of the companies that I've worked for. Usually they hire you because in your previous existence you've done something charming and idiosyncratic, and they say, oh, we need one, keyword, one of those, and then they invite you in, and as soon as you arrive, they say, no, not here. And then you have to kind of bat your head against the wall. And it's a little bit lonely sometimes, but it is very satisfying for some reason.
And it's been so much fun, I have to say,
It
to
is
go
fun.
through this large sort of audio document dump and video document dump that you gave us and Andy Lancet, our archivist, help with, to go through and pick some out for the show and just see the amazing scope of your work and creativity in your work. On the content of that one, it's pretty amazing to look back on, because I think we always tend to think of the old days as the good old days, when really things we're concerned about today, in many cases, like, we say the first generation with downward mobility and jobs that don't pay as well as the parents. It's that old. That was before Clinton joined NAFTA or the Modern World Trade Organization.
Yeah, it's really old. I think the first time I reported it out was on a CBS show with Leslie Stahl, and that was in 79. It was early. Yeah. No, and over time, you sometimes find that there were repeating themes in a career. So sometimes, I remember once I put Paul Volcker in an opera, and I didn't ask Paul Volcker for his permission. I took a recitative opera by Mozart, so it was, and then in the middle of it, there was Paul Volcker as a character. And I got a call from the Federal Reserve. And your hand begins to sweat rather thickly when these things happen. And you think, but first there's this panic, oh, why didn't I call and why didn't I tell him? But his wife wanted to give it as a party favor at his next birthday. So, that was, but you have to ask permission.
If it was Trump's Fed director, he would have said, your interest rates are going up, only yours.
Well, that's the other thing, is that there was a certain amount of forgiveness in the world, and the world is getting tighter. And the anger is higher. The brittleness, the how dare you, is more often and more regular. And so it's taking, to be just joyous, you wouldn't think would be such an offensive thing. But it's harder, and you have to insist on it, I think.
So, Green Space audience, if you've always wanted to ask Robert Krulwich a question, but you never had him over to dinner, you can do it now. Raise your hand, and we'll come around with a mic. And listeners on the radio, wherever you are, same thing. Again, we don't have our usual phone number today. That's down. So if you want to call in, here's the number for right now, 212-675-6329. For anything you want to ask Robert Krulwich on the occasion of his retirement from Radiolab. 212-675-6329, 212-675-6329. Control room, we'll take a break before we play the other clips that we have from Robert. But before we go to the break and some of this other archive material, let's talk a little bit about how you got there. Where'd you grow up?
Here in Manhattan. So did my parents, and so did their parents. And
Really?
my mom's from Tulsa, Oklahoma, but my father's from my grandson is a sixth-generation Manhattan-born boy.
Wow.
In a row. I mean, even in Nantucket, that would be a thing, I think.
Did he buy Lower Manhattan for $24? Was that him?
No. Although I do have a relative who was named Krulwich. There was an E and a T in those days, and then one of the relatives named Krulwich got involved in some kind of moral situation, taking ladies across state lines for bad purposes. And my grandfather, in an effort to distinguish we Krulwiches from Krulwich, dropped the E and the T. I think in some part of his mind he thought, well, that would be like changing your name to Armstrong or something. I don't know. But so there's now Krulwiches and there are Krulwiches, but they're all related to me, either group.
And when you were a kid, what did you fantasize about doing when you grew up? And I'm only talking about work. You can keep the other stuff to yourself. But what did you fantasize about doing when you grew up?
I did have, rather early on, a narrative sense. I would be in the tub, naked, with my feet up against the faucet, and there's a little bit of chrome around the faucet, and I would poke my face in so that I could see myself, and then I would, at the end of each day, do a show which had an open. I was about 7. It went around the nation, around the corner, around the nation, around the new world. This is the news that's making the news, and I'm Don Roberto. And I had I had a fist that I would hold up as my microphone, and I continued to behave that way. I'd go to Madison Square Gardens to track meets, and I'd have a pencil as a microphone.
You're still doing it, yeah.
Yeah.
And
But I never thought of it as a career or anything. It was just an enthusiasm.
you went to Oberlin. Why am I not surprised? What was your major at Oberlin?
History.
And I didn't know.
Jad went to Oberlin too. You understand?
I did not
yes,
know that.
We're very Obi-ish.
And I didn't know until I read it yesterday that you got a law degree from Columbia in 1974. Is that right?
That's right.
Why aren't you a lawyer?
Because the first lawyer that I worked with at a really fancy firm, and a wonderful man whom I really loved, turned to me in the summer where I was working. Actually, was with now a U.S. Senator. Chuck Schumer was in my group. He said to me, I'm going to offer you a job at this very fancy law firm, but you have to wait a year to accept it, because I have this sense that this is not right for you, and I'm going to give you a gift, which is you will have a fancy, you can tell your parents that you're not going to be out in the rain, but there's something about you that just doesn't fit this profession. And it would be a great source of happiness to me if you would use this year to give me a call and tell me that you weren't going to come here, which was both a disaster to me. I was horrified because I admired him tremendously. And but it was a gift almost like no other gift a person gets to get. I was able then to go, instead of to a $22,000 a year job, with, working with very famous people, I could go to WBAI and have some guy in California say, "The news is not funny, Bob." And that was the alternatives, the road I took. Yeah.
We'll continue in a minute with Robert Krulwich. Our phone number, 212-675-6329. We'll play an old clip of you on NPR with Susan Stamberg, and then something from Radio Lab with Robert Krulwich on the occasion of his retirement from Radio Lab. Brian Lehrer on WNYC in the Green Space.
I'm Glenn Washington, the host of Snap Judgment, and I'm so thrilled because WNYC has added something new to your Saturday afternoons. It's storytelling with a beat. Every week, you'll hear real stories from real people that will challenge the way you see the universe. Join me for Snap Judgment, Saturdays at 1 on 93.9 FM. See WNYC's complete schedule at wnyc.org/new schedule.
Support for WNYC comes from HSS, providing spine care by a team of non-surgical and surgical specialists at the #1 hospital for orthopedics, according to U.S. News & World Report. Learn more at hss.edu/spine. American Repertory Ballet, presenting New Heights, works by Trey McIntyre, Ethan Stiefel, Ricardo DeNigris, and Septime Weber, Saturday, February 22nd at the K Playhouse at Hunter College. More at arballet.org. Primary Stages, presenting The Confession of Lily Dare, written by and starring drag artist Charles Bush, at the Cherry Lane Theater now through March 5th. Tickets at primarystages.org or 212-352-3101.
If you believe democracy requires a free press, your station is WNYC, 93.9 FM and AM 820, NPR News and the New York Conversation.
Brian Lehrer on WNYC, live in the green space with Robert Krulwich on the occasion of his retirement from Radiolab. Let's take a phone call on line 3. Martha is it East Windsor? Hi, Martha.
Hi, it's Marcia.
Marcia. Hi, sorry.
Hi, such a big fan of both of you. But just about Robert Krulwich, I am so devastated that you're retiring. It's very selfish. You deserve to retire. You're amazing. But I'm going to miss you so much. I'm such a Radiolab fan, and you provide so much balance to Jad's perspective, and I'm so upset. But anyway, I just wanted to ask, how do you think you develop this narrative storytelling? Almost, you bring like an air of spiritual or very human storytelling to things that are otherwise science and news driven. Does that make sense?
It makes perfect sense. It has to do to some degree with my brain, which I'm married to a very, very fast, smart woman. I mean, to the point where we would go to her house and her dad would say to me, because she has a very fast, smart brother, and he was a very fast, smart man, and he would say at the dinner table, "Do you mind, Robert, if we just talk a little faster?"
Really?
I'd say, "What? What do you mean?" He said, just a little faster. I said, "Oh, you don't think I could follow you guys when you talk fast?" And then it would be like Simish, I couldn't understand anything that would happen, and they were all in full conversation. So I realized for a long time that I was a little bit of a slow processor, or maybe it was even like a level of learning disability in some cases. But I also realized that most people on most subjects are slow processors and know little to nothing about whether it be hockey or law or impeachment or foreign policy. So it wasn't such a terrible idea to go as slow as one of the slower people in the pack. And if you leavened it with humor and with a little bit of showbiz or just a little bit of humility, I think what Radiolab does very, very often is we just show you what it's like to be curious, that you stumble into problems, that you don't understand what the other guy heard, that you argue about what just happened, that those are important things to model, because to be curious is to be a little bit behind, which is a good thing. But it's not done very often in front of audiences. Most of journalism
it's also to admit I don't know everything.
Yeah. And in a tighter journalism situation where you have a minute 50 or whatever, you can't. Walter Cronkite never went on the air and said, "Tonight I really don't know how to pronounce this name." Because really, it wasn't that he was. It was just the clock would be ticking during that period, and then he wouldn't be able to finish his sentence if he confessed that he couldn't pronounce something.
So you pursued this as a business correspondent for NPR in the late 70s and early 80s. Here's a 1-minute clip from September 29th, 1983. You talking to then All Things Considered host Susan Stamberg.
Susan, advertisers are looking all the time for new places to put their ads.
I know. Somebody told me they put little ads now on the back of airplane boarding passes.
Really?
Yes.
In supermarkets, though, you see them on wagons and you see them above the cashiers. Well, now they've got a new idea.
What is it?
Software.
Software?
That's right. But those floppy disks that contain everything you see on the screen, computer games, word processors, whatever? Well, that has now become a new advertising market with a very special advantage.
What is that?
Well, what makes software programs so attractive to advertisers is that the ads can be tailored to the very special circumstances of the user.
You mean a word processor could maybe...
That's right.
Hello, I'm the Spellgood system. Sorry, you have just misspelled the word linguine, a common mistake. Perhaps you're getting hungry. Why not pick up the phone and call restaurant?
And then there are those games like Donkey Kong.
You have just killed a gorilla. But what about your own dog?
So that was like spell check in 1983.
Yeah, right. Wow. I don't remember that at all. We used to, the thing I most prize about that period was that Susan, there is in a creative life, there are sometimes you meet a person, Jad is certainly one, where all of a sudden you start to dance. and anything you want to do, you can do, because the other person kind of senses your next step. In Verdon Fosse, a television show recently, in that show, when Gwen Verdon meets Bob Fosse, they're very suspicious of each other, but they start to dance whatever Lola wants or whatever it is they're doing, and they're each one doing mischief on top of mischief, and they're getting giddy and they're getting fluent. With Susan, with Jad, there's been a kind of a joy. And with Susan, we would sometimes we did a series called Business Shorts, where we would dance all the pieces, tap them. Of course, we weren't actually dancing, but I was tapping wildly and she was laughing, and we were doing this, hey, Mrs. Jones, that kind of vaudeville voice. And it was like, it was like enchanting.
So here's a 2-minute Radiolab excerpt. I don't think it needs setting up. It's Robert and Jad, but it starts with Johnny Cash.
I've got 25 minutes to go.
Is that Johnny Cash?
Yes, it's Johnny Cash, and he's singing a song about the deep importance of mathematics in your life.
I got 24 minutes to go.
There's no math here. What are you talking about?
There's a lot of math here, because you see what he's doing is he's moving to his extinction, it seems, but he's being very careful to calibrate.
I got 22 minutes to go.
Oh my God, we're gonna go all the way to 1? I feel like listening to this song for 3 hours already. The numbers are making it tedious. I would, if I were him, I'd lose the numbers.
You'd lose the numbers?
Yeah.
You can't lose the numbers. You cannot lose the numbers, because numbers create order in your life.
I could lose the numbers. I could survive my whole life without them.
That's just completely ridiculous.
Easily.
No.
Try me.
All right, let me just ask you something very simple.
Yeah.
You go to buy some M&Ms, and you have $5 bill in your hand, and you give it to the vendor, and the vendor gives you back the M&Ms, and what?
No numbers required. I hand him the bill, he hands me some change. I just go by trust.
You go by trust.
Yeah.
He asked you how old you are. What do you say?
I'm middle-aged, I tell him.
With 11 more minutes to go.
Hey, listen to that. You hear that? Suppose that you're late for an appointment or something like that. Yeah? So you call up and you say, I'm going to be 3 minutes late, 5 minutes late, 10 minutes late.
I usually just wait for the call before I leave.
I know that.
Which you know is true.
I know it's true.
So yeah, don't need them.
You're a test. You're taking a test in school. You get a 98. You get a 52. You don't care?
Pass, fail.
How much gas is in your car, Jen?
I wait for the light to come on.
Suppose you want to call me. Right? Yeah, and you can't remember my phone number.
2 words.
What?
Speed dial.
How many words?
Oh, crap!
You see, you gotta use numbers.
Ha. So what was all that about? I'm sure Jad doesn't really hate numbers.
No, we had a show about numbers, and we realized that most people would immediately turn off a show about numbers, so one of us decided to be an anti-numeral person. He fell into the role rather quickly, and we love fighting, so I just decided to throw everything at him, and then I don't really think that was scripted or anything.
Wow.
I mean, we realized early on that Ira Glass had the kind of preeminent program, and his was written, and you could hear people reading. So we went through the rather stupid approach of doing everything live and then basically editing it back into shape. So everything is improvised, but the edit is actually a manufacture. But therefore, everything you hear is just literally right off the top of your...
Amazing. I mean, it must be so much fun to be in the room with
It's a lot
you.
of fun.
So we only have 2 minutes left, but I think somebody here had your hand up here in the green space. Who was that? You have it right there? Yeah. Hi.
Hi,
Real quick.
Robert. Thank you very much for your excellent body of work. I wanted to ask about Oliver Sacks, although we're running out of time. I know he was prominent on Radiolab.
Mm-hmm. He's prominent in my heart. Oliver Sacks was just peculiarly about what I love to think about. Which he also took a field that was difficult, neuroscience, and somehow came up by doing these individual case studies with such extreme emotional and gorgeous detail. He turned something complicated into a story that, in the Lincoln form, would just stay in your head and open you up to a whole new set of ideas. So there are some people who just work the foyer as opposed to the living room. They bring all kinds of people in, and they get used to and comfortable with a subject. And Oliver did that in a way that is just rare.
Work the foyer instead of the living room. What a way to put it. So you're retiring from full-time work at Radiolab, but you were telling me off the air you have some projects in the works. Anything you want to say publicly?
One of them is has to do with Oliver Sacks. It's a conversation I started with Oliver Sacks. It's a film. I don't know. I'm doing things that I never thought I could do, like internet interactive stuff. Just hold the next set of things. I mean, podcasts are now so huge, and we were there very, very early. So I thought, well, what's the next thing? And it occurred to me that maybe just drawing and typing and going back, but I don't know how to code. I do know how to draw, but I don't have the faintest idea of how to make it come alive. So once again, I'm working with the news is not funny, mom people. Who in this case says, no, it's a straight line. They're not all British. I don't know why I did. But yeah, I'm throwing myself in with a bunch of very, very talented, very different sets of people, but very talented in new ways to me, and I'm comfortably terrified.
So watch this space. Robert Krulwich will be back in one way or another. Please thank Robert Krulwich for his body of work. And listeners, thank you so much. And audience, thank you so much for coming to the Green Space.
WNYC is supported by 72 Miles to Go, a new play about the love that keeps families together no matter how far apart they are. This limited engagement begins tonight. 72 Miles to Go. Tickets at roundabouttheatercompany.org. The performing arts